Welcome to the Helping Conversation, an exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of facilitating trusting, safe, inclusive, and effective helping conversations with others. Recorded at RockVox Recording and Production Studios, Rochester, New York, Mouth Off at RockVox, rockvox.com. Having enjoyed an almost 40-year career facilitating his own authentic brand of the helping conversation, your host, Executive and Recovery Coach, Keith Greer.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for taking the time to sit in with me on this episode of the Helping Conversation. I consider myself a relatively confident person, pretty self-aware. I know what my strengths are. I know what the things are that I struggle with. But I've always said if you want a direct line to my sense of vulnerability, it would be asking me to think about my role as a parent and what that has meant to me and the challenges of raising my two children, who, thank God, right now are 29 and 28 and doing well in the world. And so today we're going to have a conversation about that with an expert on someone who works with parents in a compassionate way, in an evidence-based way, and you know how much I love that term, to help them through some of the rigors of raising children, especially when maybe you have a child that has some behavioral challenges, developmental challenges. And so I stole this first part from the website of my guest, who I'll introduce in a second, because it just so resonated with me as I was thinking about my experience with my wife, Carol, raising our two children, because my first child, Joshua, who again is now 29, married, dad, and doing wonderful, Carol and I always said to him, after he wasn't a child, that he was an absolute pain in the ass to raise from his first breath. Strong-willed, verbal, always had to have the last word. Now, on top of that, wonderful and compassionate and loving and funny and sensitive. But from a parenting standpoint, he was the one that often resulted in Carol and I sitting in our bedroom looking at each other and saying, I don't know what to do. We'll try it your way this time because I have no evidence that whatever I'm thinking about is going to work. So anyway, on this website, on my guest website, I found this. Do you ever find yourself, and this is within your role as a parent, feeling guilty, sad, or embarrassed about your child's behavior? I can so relate to that. I can think of a few times that I had to carry Josh like a loaf of bread out of Wegmans because I couldn't get our grocery shopping done because he was tantruming. Wondering if or knowing that other parents are judging you. Oh my, that's a spectator sport in our country, right? That we look in and judge parents. Dreading that your family will be stuck with this challenge forever. So I laughed there because Joshua was the one that Carol and I would look at and say, is he ever going to be able to take care of himself? And if you were to ask my mother, I was the one that she and my father used to worry about, will I ever be able to take care of myself? Blaming yourself for not feeling good enough, in all seriousness, yes, as a parent. Asking if anything can help when you've tried so much already. I don't know any parent that can't relate to every single one of those questions. And again, I have to add, Carol and I have been blessed. We raised two children that I think the challenges were within the realm of what you would expect. And yet we also are blessed with extended family. Neither of us had to do it as a single parent, which I can't even imagine. And we are blessed that we had the resources available to us, including therapists and helping people at some different times to get us through some challenging moments, especially adolescenthood. So I find it interesting in all of my work over the years how quickly we as a society love to look in and judge parents and tend to take on a very simplistic judgmental explanation of why a child might be struggling. If you see a child acting out or struggling with behavior. And, you know, in that simplistic model, we don't take into account things like cultural and social and political and economic factors. We don't take into account single parenthood and the challenges of that. And we don't sometimes just even take into account when we're looking at others that every single child comes into the world with an innate temperament. And some are just a little bit more challenging than others to help them go from childhood to adolescenthood to adulthood. And so where do we tend to go in this judgmental perspective on parent? We go to bad parent. And we just stop there. And in my 30 years in school social work, I saw this all the time. And I think it still very much is the case in our larger culture of how quickly we are to judge people who are doing the hardest freaking job on the face of the earth, which is to raise another human being. And so today we're going to talk about this really cool model that can be used by professionals to work with parents who are struggling with in figuring out how to respond to their child's behavior. And the model is something called ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. And it's the science of behavior carefully applied to the real world. So let me give you a quick definition. Applied, pertaining to real-world problems faced by real people with a focus on improving the human condition both for individuals and as a whole. Behavior, anything an organism can do from overt behaviors like breathing, running, or talking to covert behaviors like having a thought. And analysis, which is the key part here, taking the time to figure something out by honoring its complexity and working to fully understand it and determine what matters and what is just noise. And this is done through scientific data analysis. So simply put, applied behavioral analysis is the science of behavior applied to making your life better. A board-certified behavior analyst is a specialist in ABA and uses behavioral science to help make these positive changes in people's lives. And so with that said, it is my pleasure, and I'm so excited to be in this conversation, to introduce you to my guest today, Kellie Syfan. Good morning, Kellie.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here, and what a wonderful way to start our conversation.
Well, thank you. Well, let me introduce you and share with our listeners who you are. So Kellie is a behavior analyst, consultant, mindset coach, and she is the owner of Applied Behavioral Happiness, which is based in Wake Forest, North Carolina. Kellie has worked in mentor and therapy settings since high school and has 8 years experience in the field of behavior analysis. She has worked in home, school, community, occupational, and clinic settings, and in collaborative therapy with teachers, speech, hypnotherapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and others. It is Kellie's mission to bring applied behavior analysis to every family struggling with behavioral challenges and to empower and encourage the mindset of deliberate creativity in the field of behavior analysis. So, Kellie, let's jump in because this sounds so fascinating and quite honestly so hopeful for many parents who are out there. So let's just start. I always ask my guests just to share quickly kind of a synopsis of your career, how you wound up being where you are today.
Oh, absolutely. So it's a bit of a winding trail that got me here, which is not surprising. I know a lot of people in the helping community, it's a bit of a trail that leads you there. I started going, you know what, I'm going to be a horse trainer. I'm going to be a veterinarian. I'm going to be an aromatherapist. I had all these crazy dreams of what I would be when I grew up. And step by step, things started to fall into place as if they were planned by someone else, where I went, okay, I'm going to get this master's in education, but I don't really fit in as a teacher. Maybe there's something else. And I went and I sold car parts for a while. And I went, maybe I should use that master's. Let me see if there's something else. So I love horses. I got this wonderful job at a horse ranch and was working with these wild horses and abused animals. And they brought in groups of veterans and they brought in groups of kids who were in group homes due to their own abuse. And I started going, man, this is really neat. And then they said, yeah, we've got this group of special needs kids. You're going to be in charge of their class. And I went, excuse me, I'm going to do what? Because I didn't feel very qualified, but I thought, you know what, let's give it a go. And we had an amazing time. And I had this group of kiddos. We had kiddos that were diagnosed with Down syndrome. We had autistic kiddos. We had kiddos in wheelchairs. We had kiddos who were verbal, kiddos who used other ways of communicating besides their spoken voice. And I loved it, but I still went, you know what, I need to know more. I need to make sure that when I'm serving these kids, I really know what I'm talking about. And I just happened to find a job posting in behavior analysis, and the rest is kind of history. I started as most people do in behavior analysis, working with kids with autism, and spent years and years there, and slowly but surely realized, especially when I was working on the more administrative side, I'm getting all these calls from parents who are desperately wanting help, but their child isn't autistic. So what do we do? Well, as a company, we're not set up to serve them. Well, who is? Okay,
all right.
Maybe I am. Maybe that's what we can do. And that's where applied behavioral happiness came together. Like there's so much need out there. How do we help reach that need? And how do we take this really cool science, apply it really lovingly and really gently so that we can serve all different kinds of kids and have full consent-based services throughout and really make sure that we're the best that we can be for the families that are calling on us.
Awesome. So listen, before we jump into the details of the work that you do and who you do it with, I am always curious with my guests. As I always say on here, I do not believe that it is a coincidence that those of us in the helping profession found ourselves in the helping profession. So if we were to go back to childhood and look at some of your behavior or what you were involved in or how you thought about things or how you interacted with folks, what was the evidence even then, even if you didn't know it was, that you were eventually going to find yourself in a helping role?
I think the first thing that comes to mind are some images of my poor mother and bringing every kind of little hurt animal into our home. I was helping out with a hurt bat at one point. I had a tarantula. When the El Niños would come through, I grew up on the West Coast, the migrating butterflies would get wet. So I'm out there, my little rain jacket, picking up monarch butterflies and taking them, in the middle of a thunderstorm because they needed help. It was just one of those well, of course they need help. Well, I'm here. Let's fill that role. Right. And looking back, I'm like, oh, okay, that's very similar. Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah, it could be really hard. Yeah, it's not going to be comfortable, but they need help.
Yeah.
So why am I sitting here in a warm house? Let's go.
Right. So there was that beginning, that empathy, that selflessness, right? Determination to make a difference. And it sounds like, thank God for your wonderful mom.
Yeah, I'm blessed with an amazing family. Very, very patient with my antics.
Right. Because I think many would have said, keep the tarantula out on the front porch, please.
Yeah. The 5 to 6 foot snakes were not exactly her favorite. I did come home with a hurt hummingbird one time.
Okay.
That was my loudest rehabilitation, but very cute. It was far more acceptable.
That's a great story. Great story. All right. So applied behavior analysis. Mm-hmm. For us layman folks, start filling us in on what this evidence-based modality is about.
Absolutely. So a lot of people are familiar with Skinner. E.F. Skinner is the one that started going into behavior and how do we study the connections between, and not the very first one, but the one that really got deep into how do we study the connections between motivation, between reinforcement, things that make behaviors happen more in the future, and punishment, things that make behaviors happen less in the future. I know those both have pretty strong connotations in our general lexicon, but from a behavior analytic perspective, we're just talking about future occurrence of behavior.
Right.
And looking at that, he was able to create a really beautiful science behind how motivation works and how behaviors change and how to shape different behaviors. And the next big step for applying to people, and this is a controversial step, so I'm gonna raise that flag immediately and open conversation to this. The next big step for applying to humans as far as what we see with behavior analysis these days was from Lovaas. And Lovaas applied the behavior of analysis to humans, specifically autistics. And a lot of the things that he did are not things that I support, not things that I'm proud of in my science, are things that, I look at and go, oh my God, that's horrendous. How could we have done this as a science? How could we have taken the science and just made it effective and taken all the hard out of it?
Right.
But it is a part of our history and it's something that we need to acknowledge. And now as we're moving forward, we're getting deeper into how do feelings and thoughts and consent and all these different things and work into what we're doing as a science and as we're moving forward and finding different facets of how behavior analysis can be applied to the human condition and how it can be helpful and can be kind. But again, we have to acknowledge that there are brighter and darker spots as to how the science has been used.
Sure. Look, I know in my field, in the field of substance use disorder, if you go back over the last century, some of the things we did that we thought worked, frontal lobotomies, other horrendous uses of medication, behavioral kind of, quote, behavioral therapies where we just shamed and blamed people. You look back on that and you don't want to be too judgmental because it's what we thought worked. But then you look at it and I get the chills and think that was horrible, right? But it also helped in the development of where we are today.
Mm-hmm. It's and this is, pardon me if I'm waning poetic on this one, but to think about it got us here today and to think who are the casualties of that.
Oh, no question.
Right. There's so much to be talked about just on that subject alone. I don't think this particular conversation is the one to have it, but definitely that is a conversation that we need to continue as helping people.
Yes.
What got us here and what are we proud of and what are we not? And how do we hold those two feelings together? It's really interesting.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. All right. So I am a parent and I am struggling with my child, and I give you a call, and I needed you around about 27 years ago. And I give you a call and I come in. And so what does this look like for a parent and a kid when you bring applied behavioral analysis alive?
Absolutely. So the first thing is probably when you call, you're going to say one of two things. One is, hi, I'm a failure for calling you, but I'm doing it anyway.
Oh, God.
Almost every time, Keith, it breaks my heart every single time.
Right.
But at some point early in the conversation, I can't believe I have to call you.
Yeah.
I can't. And because I hear it, hundreds of times, it's like, no, you're not alone. This is very normal. And to need this support is something that is human. And the next thing that you might say at some point or allude to is, I am a bad parent, which again kills me because I'm like, if you were a bad parent, you wouldn't be looking for resources.
Yeah, right.
You wouldn't be reaching out for help. You'd be going, I'll just, all else fails, I'll try spanking.
Yeah, right.
All else fails violence.
Right.
What can we do to change that mindset is another huge thing. But that's probably the first thing that would come up in the conversation. The next is that we always offer a free consultation to make sure you're 100% comfortable with what we do. We talk about what's going on, what is happening around the specific behaviors. So can we figure out if there's some triggers that might be, can we hypothesize some triggers as to what's going on? Can we hypothesize some of the things that may be maintaining this behavior? And can we look at some basic interventions that we can put in place, just changes to the environment that will set you and the child up for success? Okay. So if we've got something like, I hear no, and then I throw tables, well, let's try to say no away from a table. Mm-hmm. It's small. Right. It's not a perfect solution, but it is a step in the right direction for setting up for success. And we can just in that first little consultation, those little tiny hey, let's just make a little shift here. I've got a couple of friends, and I call everybody I work with friends. So I'm talking about my kiddos and my families. I've got a couple of friends that will target things like coasters. Right. Because they're, they throw really well. They're nice and hard. They make a good loud sound. You can really get your feelings across. So we just temporarily clear out coasters. Right. Or we bring the books up a shelf. From there, what we do is we talk about what sort of programming is going to be most helpful, whether that's going to be, let's do a full reactivity program, which is our biggest program, something custom. It can also be, hey, I saw my older child go through this. How do we prevent this with the younger one? Right. So let's create, something to intervene because we already got the challenge here and something to prevent so that we don't, right. reach that challenge again with the next one. It's all about customizing every step of the way.
So could you give us maybe a little bit more specific example of what some of those interventions look like?
Absolutely.
And what I'm really curious about is, and you talked about this when you were talking about Skinner, is this concept of behaviors that support not doing the behavior and behaviors that could support the behavior continuing. Mm-hmm. And so how do, when you work with parents, what are some of the interventions that you start talking with them about that could have an impact on extinguishing the behavior they would like to extinguish?
Absolutely. So it's interesting that you use the word extinguish because that is another behavior analytic term. And I'll pop into that in a moment. Okay. But the big things that we talk about with parents are what can we do on the antecedent side, on the before the behavior occurs, on the trigger side, so that we can reduce that trigger. And
so at that point, you are asking parents to start to become aware.
Yes.
Right? Of things that are leading up to this specific behavior.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Yep.
with most of our cases, we require a full assessment so we can make sure we know, like, okay, here's our triggers. If we synthesize them all together, there's our, explosion situation. But if we
Right.
see them apart, we might also see little pops. And then we work on the other side, on the consequences side. Again, in behavior analysis, consequence just means what happens after.
Right.
Either reinforcement, we're more likely to see the behavior, or punishment, we're less likely. Again, I apologize for the connotations.
All
Skinner.
right, but now I'm curious. So let me ask you, I would imagine that's a challenging conversation when you first have it with parents, because all of us have that connotation of a consequence is a punishment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have to do a lot because I am prone to jargon. I'll admit it. I get so sciencey and I love my articles and I love, learning all these things. And then I realize I'm not speaking English. And the parents I'm working with are like, okay, that's nice, you crazy lady. What in the world are you trying to tell me? And especially because we're such a, we're always working to be more kind and more loving and have
Right.
more consent involved in what we're doing.
Right.
If I come forward with like, we need to apply a consequence, it
right.
has a lot of alarms, when quite often what I'm meaning to say is we need to make sure we have reinforcement available for this behavior so we increase the likelihood that it'll happen in the future.
Okay.
So it's a lot of translating and me going, oh, Kelly, you just said an English word in
Right.
a different way.
Right.
You need to translate it.
Right. So again, so maybe some examples of what are some of those. I mean, just pick some of the behaviors you see in your office. What would be some examples of interventions that you are working on with parents to impact this behavior?
So we see a lot of tantrum-like behaviors.
Right.
So that'll be screaming, crying, kicking things, destroying stuff, ripping things to pieces, throwing stuff off of tables, hitting, kicking, biting, spitting,
Right.
You name it. I've seen it. I have multiple scars from kiddos who I adore. It's just, they had a lot of feelings in that moment, and that was their best mode of expressing it.
Yes.
So everything is forgiven and all as well. But what we see if we're going, okay, we need to just go a full reactivity program. How do we take this reactivity and just bring it down to communication and bring the calm back? The first thing we do is we give them a magical word, usually something that hasn't been used before. So it doesn't have any background history with them. And when they are hanging out with us, that magical word gets them whatever they want, as long as it's within our means. So can I run out in the road? No. Can I go to the moon? Sorry. Can we go to Disneyland? Nope. But hey, can you stand on your head? You betcha. Mm-hmm. I will stand on my head for you, child. Oh, you want 12 more markers? Here comes 12 more markers. And just giving them a way to go, oh, I don't need that behavior. I have a way to communicate my need.
Right.
And then from there, inside the clinical setting, we can start going, okay, how do we work on tolerating when you hear no? How do we work on when you need to wait a little bit? How do we work on making sure you have someone's attention before you ask? How do we respond correctly when we hear that no, using our words or using a communication modality? And it's amazing what it can do. It's
right.
amazing what it can do. It looks a little crazy at first because it's like you're giving them everything. Well, yeah, that's what we want. We want
right.
them to be happy, and we want them to be using their words to get what they want.
Right.
That will start to replace that behavior.
Right. So I'm hearing, with both child and parent, really teaching some very, very new skills. But I'm also hearing, which is fascinating to me, because I don't think most of us would think that you go to this place with a child, but you're really asking a child to become incredibly self-aware about their internal state.
Yeah.
And how to put that internal state into a word that is more productive, and then a behavior that's more productive. That's pretty damn complex for adults. Never mind for a child.
It's a huge ask. And that's why we have to take it so slow.
Right.
All of our work is based, as you said, out of research. Specifically, we do a lot of work from the research of Dr. Hanley. I pull a lot from Dr. Fryman, a good bit from Dr. LeBlanc. We're constantly reaching out and pulling through. But to ask a child to make these massive changes, like you said, where on the adults it's so difficult.
Yeah.
We really have to take it slow, and they make sure that they are fully consenting to making these changes every step along the way. Because what a horrendous thing to ask them to do if they weren't consenting. That's
a very curious word, because I'm just thinking how most people are going to think about, doing this work and what you're talking about. So you're talking about giving the power of consent to a 5-year-old. So
Yes.
describe that, because that, I think I know what you mean, but I'm curious exactly what that is.
Certainly. I think the best way to describe how we view and use consent comes back to some research from Dr. Kunavatna, who I had the absolute pleasure of working under, and I was able to replicate some of her research at a past position. And in that research, what we did and what she did initially was she taught a couple different ways to communicate to people who didn't have any form of communication, whether it was using a voice output device, making a sign, like a sign language sign.
Right.
Although I will say quite often we'll use modified signs in order to help kiddos and people get to their communication a little bit quicker, and then refine from there.
Right.
Or whether it's using something vocal, verbal out of your mouth, or a picture exchange. And by teaching this group of people a couple of those modalities and then systematically allowing them to show us which they preferred, we were able to get a full choice and consent from people who had no communication method as to how they wanted to communicate with the world. Instead of us being like, well, you're going to use picture exchange.
Right.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Learn it.
Yeah.
That's how you speak, you know? So looking at it from that perspective, where we've got, in her case, she was working with adults, where she had adults that had never, ever had a way to communicate. And then she was able to go, how do you want to speak? And receive that information. Looking at that and having been able to replicate it, I go, there's no reason with a kiddo that's fully verbal that I can't make sure they are consenting, that I can't set up ways to make sure that they are consenting.
Right.
The biggest things we look for are they excited to come? And do they not want to leave? Because if they're coming here and they're like, oh, I have to go see Miss Kelly.
Yeah.
Terrible. That's a very good first sign of like, oh, I don't want to be a part of this. And the next thing is we give them choice what those words are. Like, hey, bud, do you want to talk this way? Do you want to use a picture in this moment? I've got sitting next to me some feelings cards where if you don't want to use your voice to express what you're feeling right now, I've got these other options for you. And making sure that we, whenever possible, give choice. And like, if you're uncomfortable in the room and you want to leave, you can leave. No biggie. We just have to keep you safe.
Right.
Like, I can't have you alone in a room. I can't have you running up and down the halls. But if I can keep you safe, like I had a friend recently who was having a really rough go and just wanted to rearrange the furniture in the front room. Get it, honey? Like, is that what you need right now? Absolutely. My staff and we just sat down. And after a little while, they came up to us and said, I'm building a house.
Right.
2 minutes ago, we were getting punched and kicked and stuff was thrown everywhere. And, it's just taking that time to go, oh, you're having feelings. That's allowed. You have that space. And regardless of age, I think we all should have the right to do that.
Yeah. You know what strikes me, Kelly, as you're talking, I'm thinking in my world, the two concepts come to mind. One, the difference between treating a person as an object, a recipient, or a resource. So that you are modeling with children, treating them as the best resource in their own life, which probably most of us adults don't think about doing with that age, with kids that age. And you're also, which I spend a lot of time thinking about in my world, is the concept of autonomy. Right? That the greatest gift I can give the people I work with is total autonomy. In my world, in the adult world, this is your conversation, your life. Where do you want to go? You're competent, you're creative, you're whole. It's your gig. And again, I'm thinking there's probably parents listening to you and saying, we can't do that. You're supposed to tell children what to do, right? And if they don't listen, then I tell them louder. and then I don't know what I do after that doesn't work. So that's fascinating. Yeah. And I love the fact that there's research to say this works with this age, that if we're just flexible. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is. If I said, the methods that we use, you should just try them at home. Oh, goodness.
Right.
It could be a mess. And there are many methods that I will say, like, oh, we've got a kiddo that's not having some super intense challenges. Let me just give you a couple little basics to work on. No problem. But if we're getting to a point where we're endangering ourselves, endangering others, or destroying property, let's look at taking it really slow and taking it in a safe space where we can really make sure that we're good to go.
Right. But I am curious. So as when you talk about the power of consent and choice, and the fact that you see that improvement from tantruming and throwing things to simply wanting to move the furniture around in your waiting room. How do you help parents translate that at home?
Certainly. So for these larger programs, what we do is we set up a milestone process where we have different milestones for, okay, we can use that word to get our way. We can get attention and then use the word to get our way. We can get attention, have the person go, I'm so sorry, sweetie. Hold on just 1 second. I'll be right with you.
Right.
All right, what did you need again? And we can have those pauses in there. And as we're moving forward and really enriching this skill, we get to a point where we go, okay, mom and dad, you've been watching, because that's the other thing. We often have mom and dad in the room with us the whole time.
Right.
Absolutely. And we've seen a lot of therapies where it's like, drop off your kid. Good luck. Magic will happen.
No.
We want them in as much as possible. And then we go, okay, mom, your turn.
Yeah.
And we start leading them through this and generalizing from us, the staff who had no history and then brought in this new crazy thing that works and it's kind of fun and we have a lot of good times together, and then bring it to mom and dad or to grandparents, and then out of the clinic into different areas,
right.
Whether that be the home, the school, Target, the grocery store, the local bread analogy used earlier is just something I hear so often. Like, yeah, I didn't know what to do. I just had to carry him out. Yeah,
that was it.
Good choice. Safety first.
Yeah, that happened a lot.
Mm-hmm. It's very common, and it's so we act as a culture as if it isn't. Like that's the exception where almost that's the rule. And especially in the world of COVID, we're seeing kiddos that are having a lot less practice being out in the world and a lot more
I didn't think about that.
Having difficulties at home.
Yeah.
So it's gonna probably pop up.
But it also strikes me that the other thing we think about, like, me carrying Joshua out of Wegmans, the other thing we think about in looking at that parent who's carrying their kid out is there's something wrong. There's either something wrong with the parent, something wrong with the kid, but there's something wrong versus, the range of where kids are developmentally when, as they go from birth to 5, 10, 15. And it's just so nice to hear a model that's not looking at it from the standpoint of something's wrong.
Yeah. We say all the time that we don't treat anything here.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Treat anything. I build skills through play and through skill building programs.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a treatment or a quick fix or, punish this to oblivion and make it go away, all of which there are options for out in the world. There's plenty of examples of that. I'm not your gal. This isn't the right company.
Right.
If you're looking for something that's slow and is focused on that child that's being carried out of the grocery store is missing a skill, we can help with that.
Right.
Like, no biggie.
Right.
I couldn't write cursive until I knew how to write cursive. I couldn't walk through a store and hold it together until I knew how to walk through a store and hold it together. That's okay.
The word you're using that I love and I so relate to is slow. At a time in our society when everything's fast and we expect things to be done fast. And, I was around when, and I'm not saying this model didn't work for people. It did work for people, but we can be honest about the fact that there was a piece of it that was driven by the insurance industry. Was when some of the models of therapy started to kick in of we'll see you 4 or 5 times and that'll be it. And now in my world in coaching, and when I train people in coaching, we always talk about the fact that coaching is a very patient conversation.
Oh, I love that.
Right, and compared to, it's just not fast. It's not fast. It's slow, and it's deliberate. And we create this space, as you do, for the people we work with to discover and be curious and mull things over. And we just get that change for us human beings is not a fast process. So I love that. What a wonderful message to parents. We're going to take our time here, right? Which I also think, I don't know for you, and it just popped into my head. In some other ways, I think we're going to take our time here also honors the complexity of the work we're doing.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, when you watch what we're doing, I've got magnet tiles and I'm building things, and then I build something a little different and kiddo goes, excuse me, can you build that back the way it's supposed to be? Like, clearly you're doing it wrong. You're supposed to have triangles, not squares. I mean, the things I mess up, Keith, I tell you what.
I'm sure, right?
I make the silliest mistakes. I got the wrong Pikachu sound all the time. So when you're going through that, if you're just stepping in and looking at it, it's like, that's a an adult playing with a child.
Right.
And then you look at our data sheets and you can see that we've got everything coded for every response that we're providing to help them practice these different skills.
Right.
And then you see our data analysis, which we do all through a standard acceleration chart so that we've got completely standardized analytics going through in full trend lines and are able to pull apart different pieces of data from rate to frequency to inner response times and really go, oh, no, this isn't just a lady making Pokemon noises playing with magnetiles. This is something much bigger. And from that side, it's actually something I love about what we do is when you look in, you may just see a child having a good time. But then when you see the background, everything is data driven and super heavy on that side to make sure that everything that we're doing is having a positive effect.
Yeah.
And that we're tracking all of our progress to make sure that even though it's slow, we can show parents like, hey, we are making progress and we do have proof of that, and making sure we continue to consult with them to customize as needed throughout.
So I'm curious about something, because as you were just describing that, I have this picture in my head of charting all these little behaviors. So are there two of you in the room? Like, is there someone doing the interaction with the child and someone doing some of the analytical work? Or because it just seems it would be really difficult to do both.
Yes. So we take data throughout our sessions and we graph afterwards.
Okay.
There are times when we've got kiddos that are working on like a long pause, like, hey, I'm not going to be available for a little bit and I need you to be able to play on your own.
Right.
Where I might have a staff graphing just because that's a good use of time while we're practicing those sorts of waiting skills.
Right.
But generally, we're going to do all of our graphing outside a session.
Okay. Beautiful. Oh, man, that sounds amazing and detailed and everything, moving this conversation about a child's behavior in a direction that is so opposite of all of the cultural narratives about what parents are supposed to be able to do. Right. And that, again, at the end of the day, as a parent, if I'm doing a good job, my kid is behaving well. And if they're not, it's my job to distinguish that behavior and to use punishment. And
let's talk about that.
Go ahead.
So from a behavior analytic perspective, and this, again, we've got some dark points in our history as a science, but as the new waves of behaviorism move forward, punishment is used as a very, 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 very last resort.
Okay.
And extinction is actually a fairly common practice that's still used. So extinction is when something that is usually reinforced, so something that has had a really long history of being reinforced, no longer is. So it's not directly a punishment. It's just revoking that reinforcement. So if you yell, I want a cookie over and over, and normally I'd go, oh, fine, I'm just going to give you the cookie. Hey, parents, I don't blame you. Sometimes you just need to not have that headache today.
Right.
Totally get it. You might be increasing the likelihood of that behavior because it worked. They screamed, they got a cookie.
Right.
All right. If you decide, I'm going to go through full-blown extinction for this, then they're going to scream and yell, and you're never going to give them that cookie as long as they're screaming and yelling. Sounds pretty awesome. But Keith, would you be willing to do a little exercise with me real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run extinction on you asking me questions.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me how it feels. So go ahead and ask me a question.
All right. So Kelly, tell me a little bit about your background and where you come from. Oh, okay. So you don't want to answer that. So Kelly, do you and your family own any pets? All right. For all of our listeners, she's not even looking at me right now. She's looking off to the left and to the right, looking very disinterested. Yeah. So now you're just pissing me off because you're not answering any of my questions.
Yeah. And this is the way that I explain it to parents because it works. Just ignore it.
Right.
It'll eventually work. But God, that sucks. Like if you've ever walked in a room and been like, hey, guys, and nobody says hi.
Yeah.
That feels gross. It's like if you got a coin and you go to a soda machine and you put it in and no soda comes out.
Right.
It'll be the one time that you're kicking a soda machine. Like you don't normally kick soda machines, right? Who does that? But your soda doesn't come out. You're shaking it. You're kicking it. You're pushing the buttons like crazy.
But Kelly, this is what we've always been told. We've always been told instead of punishment, right? Just ignore it. Just ignore the behavior you don't want. So you were saying there's another road to travel here.
Absolutely. The first step is if you're going to ignore, just ignore the behavior, not the child.
Okay.
So if you were asking me questions and I, for whatever reason, that's a challenging behavior, which I can't imagine in the world, it would be a very big one because questions are a good thing. Right. There are times, sure, if you're asking me, question, then we might talk about it. But I might redirect, or just, you ask me a question, I go, man, it is cold outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't ignore you entirely. I was able to give something back. Right. So you can start with thinking about that. But the next thing again is, if we go back to that example of the coin in the soda machine, if the coin is our skills, you put one in and you're out of skills and that soda doesn't drop,
right,
then you're going to be feeling pretty icky and you might engage in more behavior because you're feeling icky. Well, what if you just had more coins? So how do we go on our side and go, okay, how do I just make sure that there's more skills and that we have more tools to get through these moments and to get through these challenges, rather than using those challenging behaviors and rather than having to just ignore because we don't have anything else. Sure,
right.
Ignoring is better than straight punishing, but
right.
It's still a pretty blunt tool.
So so I'm going to use your example of my child keeps asking me, can I have a cookie? Can I have a cookie? Mm-hmm. Would some level of redirection be a bit of what you're talking about? Like if I say to my child, I don't answer the cookie question and I just say, hey, let's go over here and read a book.
Absolutely. That can be one thing.
Okay.
There's the other that I call it creative redirection, where I go, sweetie, I would love to eat cookies all the time. If I could eat cookies all the time, they would be this big. And I'm holding up my arms to make a giant circle around my head. How big would the cookie that you ate all the time, how big would that be? And we just have a moment of, let's sit down and talk about how it feels to not have this cookie right now and what would be the better situation. Man, I totally understand the way you're feeling about wanting this cookie. I wish that mine had unicorns on it. Well, I wish mine had dinosaurs. Well, great. Let's talk about how much it sucks that we don't have unicorn and dinosaur cookies right now, because it does. You know what? We can have some apples.
Yeah.
How does that sound? Maybe we can, draw a unicorn on one. And you can just create these communication situations rather than a punishment situation.
Yeah.
And very quickly, it can just become... The most beautiful thing I think I've ever seen was in a situation like that, where the kiddo, trying this over and over again, kiddo came back and went, I want a cookie. Oh man, I'm sorry. I can't have a cookie right now. If I could, I would want the biggest cookie. Yeah. And that was it. It was just, I'll take this feeling of like, man, I'm disappointed. I'll have a creative moment around it, which is that deliberately creative ABA.
Right.
The
right.
big reason why we've got that as our tagline. Because we can turn these moments of, I'm not getting what I want, into introspection and into a self-motivation to just enjoy a moment instead. And it can be really beautiful.
I'm sitting here and the word that is coming into my head is honoring, that it's a moment of honoring a child as a human being.
Beautiful.
Not as a child that I'm there to tell what to do, but that they are their own entity. I never thought about this very much when I was raising my children. Maybe this is something that's just come with older age and whatever wisdom I have. But I find myself more and more thinking about the delusion us parents are under, that we are in control of our child. Because when you really think about it, from their first breath, we're not in control of anything. We really aren't. And yet, so much of parenting is based on this, I think, delusion that if it looks like I'm not in control, I better wrestle control back. Yeah. And there's no way to do that then honors your kid, right? And it doesn't work, right? It just creates chaos. But that example you just gave is so honoring of this little human being. Yeah.
Yeah. And kids rock at power struggles. It's an interesting, fun game, and not fun like I'm not going to be crying because this is difficult as a child, but fun as in like sometimes I win and that feels sort of cool, and I get to explore this feeling and this is new and different. Yeah, it's interesting that we as adults are given the honor of watching these kiddos grow and of changing the environment and not the child. That's our big thing.
Yeah.
How do we shift the environment around kids to help them be more successful?
That's awesome.
And on a big scale, everybody does this. Like I make sure that they go to a school that I think is pretty good.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, why not do that on a small scale? I make sure that, when I'm about to tell them that it's time for bath and they hate bath, I give them a wait 5 minutes card that they can hand to me.
Yeah.
Okay, great. You get 4 more minutes. No problem. And those little things can make such a difference for, as you said, honoring them as a human. I just love that.
I have a memory with Joshua. I don't remember exactly how old he was, but he was old enough to be in a high chair. And I was trying to get him to eat some peas, and he didn't want to. And I was determined he was going to eat some peas. And he started with his little finger flicking the peas off the table at me. And I will tell you, even at whatever age he was, somewhere around there, he had such an FU look on his face to me.
Yes.
Like, go for it, dude. Right? Go for it. Who's going to win this one? We get so crazy in those situations as parents because I'm the bigger human being, so I'm going to win. Oh, my Lord.
Mm-hmm. And we are determined to be right. And something that I've seen in the practice of behavior analysis is that that sticking to extinction, that I will not respond, or that sticking to I will not reinforce unless you use this behavior. Like I won't follow through no matter what. I'm like, well, there's some gray areas. Number one, first survive the day. Let's focus on that, mom and dad. You won't be perfect because you're human, and that's beautiful. And looking at as well, those power struggles of like, okay, having as a parent, what are my list of things like you cannot run in the street, period.
Right.
You might not eat peas today. Okay. Yeah. That's not on the,
not worth the battle.
And I find myself doing that too every now and again. I'm like, oh, I've just invited a power struggle and I'm going to either win and this child is going to then lose.
Well, it's always win-lose, right?
Yeah. Or they win and then I lose.
Right.
Which is actually a loss for them too, because it's increasing the likelihood of this bigger. Let's just have the power struggle.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm a bit of a nut about in our work as helping people is very quickly creating safe and trusting relationships. So I'm envisioning, and you mentioned this earlier, parents call and the first thing out of their mouth is, and I'd written this down, I'm a bad parent or I'm a failure. So parents are walking in and they are, I would imagine, raw and vulnerable and very, very in touch with the things that are not going well in their role as parent. So what just from a parent's perspective, when they make contact with you, walk in, what are some of the things that you and your staff do to just very quickly attend to relationship building and trust building with parents? Absolutely.
So I'm thinking about particular parents, and the reason I'm thinking about particular ones is because just like everything is customized for kids, everything is customized for parents.
Right.
Outside of a COVID world, we'll be figuring out, is this a parent that appreciates physical touch, that really wants a hug?
Yeah.
Or is this someone that's like, give me my personal space, don't come near me?
Right.
Kids are the same, by the way.
No question.
Run up and hug a kid and expect to have a good relationship. Yeah. It's all, you got to ask about that too. But I'm thinking of a few in particular. And what I try to do early on is once we know the child is completely comfortable and because if they're not comfortable with mom or dad leaving the room, mom or dad doesn't leave the room. Simple as that. No biggie. They shouldn't be left with a brand new stranger being like, I don't want to be here. That's the basis of a really, really bad time and setting them up for possible problems in the future. Like, mom abandoned me with this person and they were new and scary, but they said I had to stay. Like, let's see what we can do. So once they're completely comfortable, I'll usually have one of my staff members hanging out with kiddo, creating that relationship there of like, hey, let's just have fun playing with toys.
Right.
Let's just have a good time. And I'll sit down with the parents and be like, all right, let's talk about it. We already had an initial consultation. We've already been through an assessment, but let's just talk about it.
Right.
And then I do my best, I'm not great at this, to just zip it. I'm kind of a chatty Cathy.
Yeah. And listen.
But if I can just zip it, they'll tell me what they need.
Right.
And then I just have to listen.
Yeah.
Those are two really hard things to do.
Yeah.
Listen, very hard, but it's the basis on the parent side of everything that we do.
Right. So on another level of a helping conversation you're involved in. So on one level, there's the work you actually do with parents and children. And on another level, you're the owner of a business and you are building a business. So I'm curious with let's say your CEO hat on, right? What you do in terms of creating those trusting and safe relationships with colleagues and employees with this mindset of building an organization.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I did was I reached out to some business support groups, because support groups and therapy are the best, and we need to reach out to our resources. I should mention as well that I make referrals out to either complete referrals or collaboration referrals on at least half of the people who call me, just to make sure that they're getting the right support at the right time. Even as a CEO, it'd be great if I was like, I'll take every single case and I'll give money. But if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. Or if we need another professional involved and we need more of a team approach, you better believe I've got a number of cases where I say, hey, we can't continue unless you bring in somebody who has this additional specialty. From there, I called a gal named Dawn Porter, and she's in our area and works on strengths-based coaching. And I said, okay, for my staff, we've all been through this field for a while. There's a lot of hard knocks in this field. First of all, you've got kiddos that can be really aggressive.
Yeah.
You've got, if you're working in autism, you're billing insurance, and you've got all these different things and bad feelings with other companies and not getting enough supervision and this big old like dust ball of micro traumas that can come in with staff. And I said, Dawn, how do I turn this from something that is going to weigh my staff down and turn it into how do we focus on their strengths and kind of get through this trauma that we've all had within the field or within working with kiddos before and create something better. And she put together a beautiful workshop for us where we went through like, okay, where's all the things that you don't like about working in this field? And let's take all those and let's play Let It Go and rip them up. Right. But before we do that, let's create the opposite of that. And I've got some sticky notes up in here and up in another room, like big sticky notes with the things that my staff have told me, like, hey, this is our aspirations within this company.
Right.
And it was beautiful because the same things that I had started with, creativity, consent, making sure we're reaching out to the whole community, that we have options regardless of budget, that budgets do not get in the way of timeframes. We take as long, like if a child needs more time, it doesn't cost you more than if they get it done quickly.
Right. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. It all came out. And I was like, okay, this is a team that's really bought in and is ready to rock. And then high levels of supervision to make sure that everybody has the support they need and checking in and being willing to have those helping conversations of, hi, I think I messed up. Did I mess up on this? Like going to my staff and going, the way I dealt with that, I think I might've been, for example, like peppering you with ideas over your weekend.
Right.
And that may not have given you a break. I did this recently. It was, and the staff came back and was like, no, this time it was cool, but it won't be every time. Okay, great.
Awesome.
I need to make sure that I'm asking for consent from my staff before I send them a bunch of stuff over the weekend. It's the same stuff, just repeated.
Yeah. What's wonderful about what you just said in the world of neuroscience with trust and safety. And we know that when we are in relationships that are feeling really good and safe and trusting and inclusive, that if you could do a blood draw, the primary neurotransmitter you would find is oxytocin, right? That cuddle, right? It's that cuddle neurotransmitter.
Snugly hugging hormone.
Yes, right. So that's one of the things we now know is that's what we want to increase the production of in our interaction with others. So there's some research out there in the world of leadership that says that when leaders do what you did, which is, hey, I might have made a mistake, or hey, people, I'm open to your feedback. Essentially, it's a leader showing vulnerability, that when a leader shows vulnerability, it actually increases the production of oxytocin in the brain of the rest of the people. That people feel more connected to you as the leader because you're not all knowing and you're cool about that, right? And you make mistakes like everybody else. Yeah.
And what a beautiful mirror to what we're telling parents.
Yes, right.
Like, it's okay. You're not all knowing.
Right.
You're not supposed to be.
Right.
That's okay.
So you've
and
already
reaching out to professionals is okay. As the owner of the company, I'm doing that same thing. Like, how do we model that this is okay?
Right. For all of us. For all of us.
Yep.
So you already started to answer my next question, which is, what are some of the challenges to you of this facilitating this particular helping conversation? And you talked about some of the, micro traumas and things like that. Anything else that you would add to that just makes this job? We know about all the good stuff and helping people, and that's all wonderful, but there's some challenges here.
Oh, definitely. There's the fact that I'm not a magician and my staff aren't either. And there are times when we're going pretty good, we'll have a little ups and downs, and then all of a sudden we'll have a major resurgence of a behavior or a sudden increase in the intensity of a behavior. And that will break your heart because you've got this child that you love, or this, because we work usually between 2 and 10, but I've got a couple teens as well. So young adult that you just adore. And all of a sudden your world is shook because you started to feel like that knower of all. And you started to do that. Like, I can do this. I'm great at this, which is good. But there's that little level of, I can do this alone, or I can do this and I've totally got it. And when that gets shook, when you have that moment of, it's not perfect and these are humans and we're going to have moments where it, we pop up and down and this is a hard moment, it can really break your heart. It can make you feel like am I supposed to be in this field?
Right.
Did I mess up?
Yeah.
Should I have never taken this case on in the first place? Am I actually not helping? And certainly there are cases where that can be true, but usually it's just a bump in the road,
right,
and we can pull our resources and make sure that we're going to be okay moving forward.
Yeah.
But man, I tell you, that breaks your heart.
It's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah, I'm sure you feel that as well.
Oh, no question. Right? No question. Working in the world of helping another human being, it is. I always have this picture in my head of, there's some place, I don't know, a foot or two out from me where I end. And then there's the person that I'm working with, and there's the place where they end. And there's this little spot where we come together. And that is the most intimate spot, complex spot, because that's where the helping takes place. But it is not easy.
No.
Not easy. On either side. Yeah.
It can be, I think the other big thing that can be really difficult is because we work with kids, and kids, when they have big feelings, tend to cry, tend to express them in really, really, really pointed ways.
Yeah.
We don't yet have the capacity to understand that what they're doing in that moment is super hurtful.
Yeah.
They can say some things are hilarious.
Right.
Like I've been called every name in the book. Yep. But some things they'll just get you to the core.
Yeah.
And in those moments that they're upset and they're expressing themselves, and you need to make space for that. You don't need to make it better. It's not about you fixing this moment. It's about you holding that space so they can have that moment safely.
Yes.
And that means that you're going to take the brunt of it. You're going to have all the feelings now. It's coming back. And it's going to hit you. It would be way easier just fix it, and you wouldn't have to feel it too.
Right.
And those moments can be really difficult. And making sure, one other thing I do with my staff to make sure that we don't burn out on those things is we set one weekend a month that's a 3-day weekend, just because I know if I can on the antecedent side, before the behavior happens, give them that break, then the behaviors surrounding burnout won't occur, and we won't have to worry with hey, you keep canceling and saying it's this, but I'm not quite sure if it's actually that,
Right.
So it's the same science applied in pretty much the same way.
Beautiful.
I do a lot of repeating, Keith. I apologize.
That's good. That's good. I love this because I think this is, Kellie, this to me is so relevant for any helping conversation. I hold space. I don't fix.
Yes.
I hold space. I create and I hold a safe, trusting space.
Yep.
And I'm patient, and not to minimize the skills I bring into that space, but I don't fix. Yeah. That's beautiful. So one of the things we talk a lot about on this podcast as a foundational skill of helping conversations is to be strength-based. And you've talked about that in a variety of different ways in your work with parents and with children. But I'm always curious with my guests about your strengths. So share with us a few of your personal and professional strengths that work for you in all different areas of your life. Absolutely. So I always, you could take, because I have the taken the Gallup, the Strengths Quest, and all that. And I had a concentration in leadership for my undergrad, so I've taken every strength sort of test you can get out there. But I think when I reflect on myself, the strengths that I love the best are kind of the ones that I'm trying to instill in the company. Yeah. And not to say that I don't have incredibly strong weaknesses that also need to be granted, I get that part, but strengths, we're just being strength-based
only
here.
In this moment. I am incredibly creative. Mm-hmm. I have a minor in creativity and have continued research in creativity and how training staff in creative output can help their interactions and the progress of the kiddos they work with.
Right.
I am very focused on growth. I live on a farm, so I'm surrounded by growth. And I get to watch these kids grow. And as I said, some days are yay, and some days have little dips, but I get to watch them grow and parents grow, and I get to watch my staff grow. And I love that. Just being able to be there for them and lift them up so they can lift up our kids. It's like being Atlas under the world. I just get to carry this beautiful thing and watch it grow. How cool is that?
Right.
And my last one would be that I really love the strength that I have around seeing something that's very sad or very difficult and being willing to join that moment calmly. Whether, again, I live on a farm, which means I see a lot of life, but also crops fail or an animal will pass away. And just being able to be there in that moment is something. And again, when when I see those heartbreaks in my staff, or when I see a parent that's having a really rough go, and just being like, okay, I can calmly join you in this moment if you'll have me.
Yeah.
That's something that I really like about myself, and I would consider a big strength.
All right. I'm stealing that one, Kelly. That's awesome. That's just
all yours.
Like that is just such an awesome picture and an awesome skill, because that's not easy to walk in to the energy of somebody else's emotion in that moment and not get swept up by it.
Certainly.
Staying calm, right? Or staying quiet.
Honestly, it's an interesting one, Keith, because you used the word empathy earlier. And I have a very interesting relationship with that word, because empathy can mean the soaking in almost of other emotions. Whereas I'm not sure if empathy is the right word to describe that action in that moment, that particular strength, because it's the existing around and not so much taking it in, but just like allowing and moving within.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I haven't been able to find a good word for it.
So it's interesting you brought up empathy, because you know how often you hear empathy described as it's your ability to put your feet in somebody else's shoes. Mm-hmm. So and I don't know if I'm saying the same thing you're saying. I might be. I have always described it as it's my ability to put one of my feet in one of your shoes.
Oh, I love that.
And I keep my other foot squarely in my shoe.
I love that. That's the beautiful side of empathy, not the I'm stealing your trauma and making it mine.
I can go there with you.
I
can go there with you to that emotional state. I can connect to a moment in my life when I might have experienced that emotion, but I don't get swept away. Right? I keep one foot in my shoe. Yeah, that's always helped me. That's always worked for me.
Good, I can steal that.
You steal that. All right.
We're even.
All right. So if somebody is listening and they are thinking, this ABA thing sounds really cool, it could be, the way I want to help. What would your words of wisdom be to somebody who says, I'm really interested in pursuing this as a career?
Ooh, as a career. I love that. So one of the things that we're trying to do in our area is get more kids involved, like high school kids. Yeah. If you are able and you've got the time and it is safe in your area, again, we're speaking in the time of COVID, to do some volunteer work in behavior analysis. Every company just about could use a hand.
Okay.
There's a lot going on. Getting some basic background in data analysis, especially in different types of graphing.
Right.
We use a lot of visual analysis. We're shifting a little bit more into statistical analysis, but as a field, it's a lot of visual analysis of data. I would say start, if you're on social media, so if the kids getting on social media, start looking up people who have had wonderful experiences and the people who have had horrendous experiences. Right. And again, hold the space for that and realize like, okay, if I'm getting into this field, how do I make sure that I do better and that I honor those that I'm serving instead of just telling them what to do or continuing what could be traumatic or difficult for different people to experience. Again, doesn't matter if it's effective, because there's a lot of things that are effective but are also pretty horrendous. Yeah. So just feeling that out and making sure that you're comfortable with what it means to be a part of this field, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the ugly, and then finding out when you're talking to different companies where they come from. Like we talked about extinction. Right. If you're going, all right, Kelly, that extinction thing sounds like it, we might want to take it easy. And you go into a company and say like, hey, what are your thoughts on extinction? They're like, oh, we use it all the time. Okay. Well, then that might not be the best fit for you.
Right.
And that's okay too. Yeah. But there's some key things that I would look into, especially having reviewed statements and listened to voices of people who've been through ABA and didn't have the positive experience that they could have.
Right.
How do we, as we're looking at companies to work for, go, oh, I'm going to check on that thing and see what their thoughts are on it, so I can feel whether or not this is somewhere that's going to be positive for me to be. Beautiful.
So, Kelly, if people are interested in getting in touch with you, how might they do that?
Absolutely. Oh, I love talking to people. So feel free to go on the website, www.appliedbehavioralhappiness.com. My email is Kellie, Kellie, @appliedbehavioralhappiness.com. I've got all my phone numbers and everything listed there if you want to give us a call. We've got a bunch of different ways that you can connect with us. But if you just let us know that you just want to talk, we're happy to talk. I've got scheduling links just for networking and getting to know people. I've got those free initial consultations if you're interested in talking about services. We've got online courses and virtual options so we can help people all over the world. Whatever we can do to help, we're gonna do our best to try.
And you've created a landing page, right, on your website?
Yes. So for listening to this podcast and making it all the way to the end, woo, you're going to be able to get a free gift that's going to help you out with a couple of different conversations that we often have with kiddos and help parents have with kiddos that are really difficult. But with some of these starters, you'll be able to have a much easier time getting into these difficult helping conversations that will be really beneficial for you and your child to have.
Beautiful. And for those, regardless of the platform on which you are listening to this podcast, please go to the written description, and all of that contact information as well as the URL for the landing page will be in that description. And please do not hesitate to reach out to Kellie. Kellie Syfan, thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. You do amazing and such important work. And again, it is just such a difficult job being a parent, and it is so comforting to know that there are folks like you out there who are caring and compassionate and empathic and skilled and utilize science in doing the work that you do. All the best of luck to you.
Thank you so much, Keith. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
So I hope everybody enjoyed that. That was just a brilliant conversation. I love that. And I have heard and understood a little bit about ABA, but now I feel like I know much more. And it sounds like it is such a powerful helping mechanism for parents. So if you are listening and you are a parent and you find yourself in those struggles, please reach out to Kellie and have a conversation, because I don't know any parent that needs to go this alone. And people like Kellie are out there. So I appreciate everybody taking the time to sit in with us today as we continue to shine a light on the skill and talent of those individuals like Kellie that invite another into that compassionate, complex, and intimate space called the helping conversation. Everybody have a great day.
We thank you for sitting in on our discussion today on just one unique version of the Helping Conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's podcast, so we sincerely invite you to follow, rate, and most importantly, review our episodes. For more information on Keith Greer and this podcast, log on to keithgreercoaching.com. Please join us for our next episode as we continue the exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of the Helping Conversation.